It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night that made you want to stay inside and lock your doors. But Sarah had no choice. She had to leave her apartment and head to her car, which was parked on the street a few blocks away. Sarah was a young woman who lived alone in the city. She was used to walking alone at night, but tonight she had a feeling that something was off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew that she was being watched. As she walked down the street, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around but saw no one. She quickened her pace and soon heard the footsteps again. She turned around once more, but still no one was there. Sarah started to panic. She knew that she was being followed, but she didn't know by whom. She broke into a run, hoping to make it to her car before anything happened to her. As she reached the car, she fumbled with her keys and finally got the door open. She jumped inside and locked the doors. She let out a sigh of relief, thinking that she had escaped whatever danger was following her. But as she turned the key in the ignition, she saw a figure in the rearview mirror. It was a man, with a hood over his head, holding a knife. Sarah screamed and tried to start the car, but it wouldn't turn over. The man approached the car, and Sarah could see the glint of the knife in the streetlights. She knew that she was in trouble. Suddenly, there was a loud noise, and the man fell to the ground. Sarah looked up to see a group of people approaching. They had heard her scream and had come to investigate. One of the men, who was a police officer, approached the car and helped Sarah out. He told her that the man who had been following her was a known murderer who had been on the loose for weeks. Sarah couldn't believe her luck. She had narrowly escaped being the murderer's next victim. She was shaken but relieved to be alive. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the murderer was still out there. She was afraid to leave her apartment, even during the day. She knew that she had to do something to feel safe again. Sarah decided to take self-defense classes. She spent hours learning how to defend herself against an attacker. She practiced every day, honing her skills and building her confidence. One night, a few months later, Sarah was walking home from a friend's house. She was feeling good, knowing that she could protect herself if she needed to. But as she walked down the street, she saw a familiar figure in the shadows. It was the murderer, back again. Sarah's heart raced as she realized that she was going to have to fight for her life. She took a deep breath and braced herself for what was to come. The murderer approached her, knife in hand. Sarah didn't hesitate. She used the skills that she had learned in her self-defense classes and fought back with everything she had. The fight was brutal, and Sarah was pushed to her limits. But she refused to give up. In the end, she managed to disarm the murderer and knock him to the ground. The police arrived a few minutes later, and Sarah told them what had happened. They took the murderer away, and Sarah was left alone on the street, shaken but alive. As she walked home, Sarah realized that she had faced her biggest fear and come out on top. She had survived a terrifying encounter and had proved to herself that she was strong and capable. From that day forward, Sarah knew that she could handle anything that life threw her way. She had faced her worst, murder away, and Sarah was left alone on the street, shaken but alive. As she walked home, Sarah realized that she had faced her biggest fear and come out on top. She had survived a terrifying encounter and had proved to herself that she was strong and capable. From that day forward, Sarah knew that she could handle anything that life threw her way. She had faced her worst fears and had come out stronger for it. She continued to practice her self-defense skills and even began teaching others how to defend themselves. But as time went on, Sarah started to notice that she was being watched again. It was subtle at first, just a feeling of unease that wouldn't go away. But then she started seeing the same man following her, lurking in the shadows wherever she went. Sarah tried to ignore it, thinking that maybe it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as the days went on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. One night, Sarah was walking home from a late shift at work when she saw the man again. He was walking towards her, and she could see the glint of a knife in his hand. Sarah froze, not sure what to do. She had thought that she was prepared for anything, but now she realized that she was wrong. She was defenseless, and the man was getting closer. But just as the man was about to attack, something miraculous happened. He stumbled and fell to the ground, dropping the knife as he did so. Sarah looked up to see a group of people approaching. They had heard her screams and had come to her rescue. Among the group was a woman who had been in one of Sarah's self-defense classes. She had recognized Sarah's screams and had called for help. The police arrived soon after and arrested the man. They told Sarah that he was a serial killer who had been on the loose for years. Sarah was in shock. She couldn't believe that she had narrowly escaped death once again. But this time, she knew that she wasn't alone. She had a group of people who had her back and who would do anything to keep her safe. From that day forward, Sarah never took her safety for granted. She continued to practice her self-defense skills and stayed vigilant, always on the lookout for danger. But she knew that she wasn't alone, and that gave her the strength to face whatever came her way. In the end, Sarah realized that the only way to overcome her fears was to face them head-on. She had survived 2 terrifying encounters, but she had also learned that she was stronger and braver than she had ever thought possible. And as for the murderer who had tried to kill her twice, he was finally brought to justice, and Sarah could finally rest easy, knowing that she was safe from harm. Years went by and Sarah continued to live her life, always cautious and alert but never letting fear rule her. She became a self-defense instructor full-time and started teaching women of all ages how to protect themselves against potential attackers. Sarah's classes became very popular and she soon became known as the go-to person for self-defense in her community. She was a mentor to many women and always made sure that they felt confident in their abilities to protect themselves. One day, Sarah received a message from one of her former students. The woman had been in a situation where she had to use the skills she had learned in Sarah's class to defend herself against an attacker. The woman had been walking home from work when a man jumped out from behind a bush and grabbed her. But she remembered the moves Sarah had taught her and was able to fight off her attacker and escape. Sarah was overjoyed to hear that her student had been able to defend herself successfully. She knew that her teachings were making a real difference in the lives of the women she taught. But Sarah's happiness was short-lived when she received a disturbing phone call later that week. It was the police, informing her that the man who had tried to kill her twice before had been released from prison. Sarah was terrified. She had thought that she was safe, but now she realized that her worst nightmare could become a reality once again. She knew that she needed to be extra cautious and take extra measures to protect herself. Sarah went into hiding, changing her name and relocating to another city. She knew that it was extreme, but she couldn't take any chances. She didn't want to be the victim of another attack, especially not by the same man who had tried to kill her twice before. But even with all her precautions, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. She knew that she couldn't live in fear forever, but she didn't know how to overcome her anxiety. One day, Sarah decided that she needed to face her fears once again. She couldn't live her life in hiding, always looking over her shoulder. She needed to confront her past and move on. Sarah contacted the police and asked if they could arrange a meeting with the man who had tried to kill her twice before. She wanted to talk to him, to understand why he had done what he did and to finally put her fears to rest. The police were hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to Sarah's request. They arranged for her to meet the man in a secure location, with several officers present to ensure her safety. Sarah sat across from the man, staring into his eyes. She could see the same emptiness and coldness that had been there when he had tried to kill her before. But instead of feeling afraid, Sarah felt a sense of calm wash over her. She realized that the man who had tried to kill her twice before was nothing but a broken, damaged person who had allowed his anger and hatred to consume him. Sarah listened as the man spoke, telling her about his childhood and the trauma he had suffered. She could see the pain in his eyes, and for the first time, she felt sorry for him. When the meeting was over, Sarah left feeling lighter and freer than she had in years. She had faced her fears and had come out stronger for it. She realized that the only way to truly overcome her fears was to confront them head-on, no matter how scary it may seem. As she walked out of the secure location, Sarah felt a sense of closure. She knew that the man who had tried to kill her twice before was finally behind bars for good, and that she could finally live her life without the constant fear of being attacked. And as Sarah looked out at the world, she realized that there were still many other women out there who were living in fear, just like she had been. Women who had been victims of violence and abuse, women who didn't know how to protect themselves, women who needed someone to guide them. With a newfound sense of purpose, Sarah decided to dedicate her life to helping these women. She started a non-profit organization that provided free self-defense classes and resources to women in need. Sarah's organization quickly gained attention and support from the community. Women from all walks of life came to her for guidance and protection. And Sarah was always there for them, ready to listen, ready to teach, ready to empower. Years went by and Sarah's organization became a national phenomenon. She was invited to speak at conferences, on television shows, and even to the White House. Sarah had become a voice for women's safety and empowerment, and she was making a real difference in the world. And as Sarah looked back on her life, she realized that everything that had happened to her, the attacks, the fear, the trauma, had led her to where she was now. She was a survivor, a warrior, a leader, and she knew that there was no stopping her. As Sarah stood on stage, facing a sea of women who had come to hear her speak, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had come a long way since the night she had been attacked, and she had helped so many women along the way. As she spoke, Sarah shared her story of survival and empowerment, urging women to take charge of their lives and never let fear hold them back. She spoke of the importance of self-defense, of being aware of one's surroundings, and of standing up for oneself. As Sarah finished her speech, the crowd erupted into applause. Women came up to her, hugging her, thanking her for everything she had done for them. And Sarah knew that this was her calling, her purpose in life. She had gone through so much pain and trauma, but in the end, she had emerged stronger than ever before. And she knew that as long as she had the support of other women, she could continue to make a difference in the world. And as Sarah left the stage, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had survived the unthinkable and had turned her pain into something positive. She knew that there were still challenges ahead, but she was ready for them. She was a survivor, a warrior, a leader, and nothing could stop her now.